back. And I want to talk to you about what I learned this Sunday and what happened to me earlier today to kind of bring it all together. Now, the short version of it is that I always have a concept or an idea. I think that I'm very blessed that God kind of sprinkles thoughts and ideas, and I have an experience, and it's something that I can elaborate on. But oftentimes, I'm waiting for the right moment. I don't cease the opportunity to just do and say things. Um, I do record a lot of my thoughts when I have them, but I'm a little critical of folks that like will have a moment and just record it and post it. But a friend of mine said, uh, "Good thoughts are like a woman in the night, like they're fleeting or something like that." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Um, but anyway, earlier today, I I was having a good day. And I had a good day. Like I won't even sit here and say anything other than that. I had a really good day. Um, but earlier today, I decided to take a minute to go stand out on my balcony because I moved out of New York, so I got stuff like a balcony now, and I'm looking at mountains and I'm looking at the sun, and just taking in outside. And while I'm out there, I'm thinking about all of the different limitations that I accepted while living in New York City. Now, this is not for a moment a bash on NYC. Hear me, and hear me clear. New York City is top notch. It's not about shitting on the city, not by any means. I'm talking about the trade off that happens when you have the beauty of the city. And I'm out here and just taking it all in. And not just taking it in, but enjoying it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why would they stay there? I'm like, even if they don't leave New York City and come here, like, just go someplace else and see if you like it. Because you never know. Like, you might like it. You might like it. And God slowed me down. He slowed me down and whispered, that's not your business. I'm like, word, it's not my business. Nope, it's not your business. How many times has God called you to do something and you didn't do it until you was ready to do it? And I was like, okay. I said, yep, you're right, Lord. I'm minding my business because that moment was the reckoning of like, Lord, is that what that's like? Where it's like, are you walking around with worry, with stress, anxiety, uncertainty, and damn near schizophrenic. And God is like, yo, just sit down and read your Bible. Just take a minute and pray. Rest on the seventh day. You don't need to work every single day. Rest on the seventh day. And how many times did I not follow that rule? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. And if God can practice patience with me, it is not my place to tell anybody what and how to do anything. I am just a sister, a friend, an auntie, a daughter, just all of the things. And I got to stay in my lane because even God, in all that God is, the Alpha through the Omega, He ain't pushing Himself on nobody. And I hope that at least gives someone permission. You'll let it go. You did everything that you could, and they'll come around when it's time. And if they don't, that's okay too. Just pray that they make it through. And so, one of the concepts that I have been sitting with and holding on to for whatever reason, I mean, I know why. It's just thinking that the right time will come, the right look will come together, hence the puffy hair. Uh, that the day will be easy and that the guilt won't set in and the uncertainty won't happen. And that's not really how that goes. You just kind of got to go with it. And you kind of have to just pray away all of the discomfort and realize that you got one life. Things will happen. And I promise the worst of it is not posting on YouTube. So after spending some time tugging and worrying and convincing myself that I could have this dialogue, um, I want to talk about this thing I've been thinking of, and it's victimhood and fasting. Yeah. So, another venture that I am on in this current journey is I am pursuing my psych degree. I want to do this from a place of responsibility and appropriate vantage point. Now, understand, like everything, um, this is all theory, this is all judgment. Like I said, God is very close to me, and I want to make sure that I can have these conversations from places that are responsible intellectually and ideologically. um, and while I am in the process of learning and growing, I have all of these thoughts, and I just want to make sure that they make sense and that they fair. And the upside is I was tuned into church on Sunday. I watch the Potter's House. I love them. I adore them. I think that they're fantastic people. I think that I'll mess around and like put the link to this particular service in the description box of this video because these concepts align. And I think that this woman, her name is Dr. Anita, also a psychologist. She's fantastic, and I think that there's so much of us that, like the battle between the the flesh and the spirit, like we don't really realize how deep that battle goes until you start to read about things like conditioning, uh, and the hierarchy of needs and how we tend to misplace them. So going back to my my discussion that I want to have today is about victimhood and fasting. And this is an interesting thing because I've always admired people with discipline. And religious discipline is not something that I admire less, right? And particularly one of the things being fasting. So back in 2019, 2020, right as a matter of fact, right before the pandemic started and throughout my 20s. So throughout my 20s, I had always been a diet freak and that sort of thing because, dysmorphia and I'm by no means a petite little thing, a slight bit of a plush pal. And I've struggled with that. I've struggled with that my entire life. And one of the things that I have come to understand or started to state about myself was that food is my drug of choice. I'm not really good with people. If people hurt my feelings, if people do and say things that I don't like, I tend to retreat. I tend to not really engage. And my capacity to stop talking to people while it is very difficult sometimes, my my pride will very much go full throttle and it'll be like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So um that's a thing. That's a thing. It's do I think that it's working or it's healthy? That's a completely different story because I think that everything is done with purpose and when done in moderation makes sense. But that is kind of away from the point. Fasting. Back to the story of 2019, 2020. When transitioning from my old job, I had a group of friends and we did fasting and prayer throughout 2020 and it was amazing. Like you talking about water fast, Daniel fast, and I had done this a series of times and I had the most significant weight loss that I could possibly imagine, and I had gotten super small and I was super proud of myself. I was super happy about it. And the fasting process does include the changing of your diet. That is definitely my watch telling me that I can still do it. Um, Sorry. Yeah. All right. We're gonna try to make this quick because I'm gonna go work out. Anyway, so the fasting includes the removal of some sort of food, of some sort of item, something that you tend to lean on a lot, that you realize that you have probably a poor relationship with, or what have you, and it's keeping you away from God. And you take these things out of your life so that you can come closer to God and you can have a conversation with God and you could hear God clearly, right? So fasting is quite literally like physical detox, spiritual trap doors open, let the Lord in, right? Like it's kind of like that formula. It's a bit more complex than that, but that was how I understood it. And in the process of fasting and praying, and like I said, having all of this physical success, I remember this very, very light feeling, this very strong feeling. It was so crazy. Like it felt like I was walking on clouds, but it felt like I could take on the world, right? And I have been holding on to that memory of that feeling for quite some time because I was fine. Like my weight was under control for a good amount of years, but it started to creep. It started to creep. And there were all of these different things that were going on that I could tell you that I'm like, yep, I'm eating because this does not feel good and I don't want to deal with these emotions. And you know, I'm not going to necessarily have a drink. I might not necessarily, hit the Zaza, but I'm going to get these wings though. Like, you know what I mean? So we all got our thing. Time goes on and man, it don't matter like what I cut out, how I cut it out. It doesn't matter how much I'm working out. Nothing is working. um I'll get on like a version of a fast. Daniel fast in particular is, a vegan fast, and it's actually like a clean vegan fast. Like it's one of those challenging ones. Kind of was able to lean into that a bit. I would do like a detox and things like that, and I just can't stick it out. I cannot see these things through, and I'm like, yo, this is crazy because I'm like, yo, I had my relationship with food under control, and hear me when I tell you, I'm like, yo, this is not. It's not making sense. And so here I am. I've come to the point where I'm saying, like, yep, food food is absolutely an addiction. So remember, we fast forward to 2025, and like I said, top of the video, I'm in school for psych, and doing one of the psych classes, and one of the things that we end up talking about is obesity is increasing around the world. And the focus is America, but it's like more than half the population counts as overweight, obese, and morbidly obese. And I'm like, yo, what the fuck? I'm like, really? I was like, it's not just me. It's like, yeah, clearly I'm not the only one. And another thing that we talked about was, uh, is the world more stressed? That was one of the last papers that I wrote, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. And then the next paper that I wrote was about uh, personality disorders. And one of the things that I decided to focus on, it wasn't personality disorders, it's mental health disorders in general, but I decided to write about schizophrenia. And one of the things that's noted about schizophrenia is that it is prominent in inner cities. And so there is a relationship of more stress in inner cities. There's a relationship of more stress inner cities and schizophrenia and addiction. And then obesity is overall just everybody's just a little bit fatter than we used to be. I've always been fat, so that's not my story. I'm still smaller than the biggest I've ever been. My bad. Just had to sneak that in there. And so in this process of going through all of this stuff, like, immediately I'm like, all right, Lord, you're showing me all of this stuff, and I'm getting some understanding about what's happening in the brain. And I'm like, God, show me where you fit. And what I understood, what God whispered back was, you know how bodybuilders have a certain physique and athletes have a certain physique depending on what sport they play, and those that do calisthenics have a certain physique. He's like, yeah, the Bible and a relationship with God is kind of like, what have you decided to use to build your muscles in your brain? I was like, that's something. And so now we go back to this concept of fasting. So I'm like, Lord, like, what is happening with me in this fasting? And like I said, in realizing all of these different things, I'm like, it's not a drug of choice. It is the thing, and arguably you could call it a drug, but the reason that is not acceptable to be called a drug is because it is not chemically altering by any means. Now, there is a relationship between food and the limbic system and the reward system. It's a whole nother thing. But a part of what I understood about this was, for instance, I have a thing for not just sandwiches, but soggy sandwiches. So, like, if I go to the store and I buy a sandwich, the sandwich, I'm completely fine with the sandwich sitting in the passenger seat, not doing anything, and just kind of aging. Most people do not like that. They think it's disgusting. Some people get it, some people don't. Long story complicated. In me having to deal with or face this emotion of what is this about this sandwich, because we're talking about food and obesity, and girl, like, how did you get this problem? It made me reminisce this, and I sit with it and I'm talking about it, and I realize that there's a relationship that I have that is positive with this sandwich, because the first time that I was able to go on a school trip and go to school with lunch, it was a sandwich. And particularly the soggy sandwich is what I think about when I was in school, and that moment, that perception of happiness and acceptance and fitting in, and you are enough and you have enough. And I said, hold on a minute. That's that's crazy, because what I found out talking to God and going to class is that something like a sandwich, for me, I have my survival system that tells me, like, that you need to eat because it's been a couple hours. And then I have a conditioning system that, in the event that I feel displaced, in the event that I feel unsure, that I don't feel good enough, if I feel like I don't have the means for something like a soggy sandwich will take me back to the positive place when I was a kid. Now let's go back to this fasting thing. What I thought was that fasting was just about opening the trap door for God to talk to you. And the benefit or the perk is, of course, if you're eating less, you're probably going to lose weight. Mm-mm. It's not just that. I discounted how complex God is and God can be. I took for granted that a big part of the fast back in 2019, back in 2020, was that we were having conversations about forgiveness. We were having conversations about letting certain things go and not walking with ill will for certain people, realizing that you can't make people be who you want them to be. You need to know who you are and make a decision about who fits and who doesn't. Because if God don't make people change, why do you think that you have the right to? And so now we go back to this perception of victimhood. And the reason that I use victimhood, originally it was going to be vulnerability, because I recognize that it's usually the thing that we don't know about ourselves. It's the part that we're not really paying attention to that leaves us vulnerable for relationships that are not ideal, for making connections to fill voids that we're not actually facing anymore. And the reason that I say it's victimhood is because there's a lot of us that have been through something, And we might not be the best version of ourselves. And we might not have the best practices. And we might not say the nicest things, but we feel like we have the right, because this is called observer action bias. You judge people by their behavior and you judge yourself by your intent. And you think because your intentions align with something that you think is right, that you're not still participating in the action of changing someone's mind, telling them what they should be doing. And hear me when I tell you, I think intention actually makes the difference for where you end up to, right? I don't think that if you have good intentions, that even if you might have did something and it was like, yeah, I wanted to help them, you genuinely do want to help them, but baby, like, please understand, people got to help themselves. The Lord is not out here talking about you got to come down to this place and you got to this. God talks to everybody. Remember the Good Samaritan in the good book? The woman at the well, the woman with the thimble of oil that let the man in her house and fed him because she's like, yeah, we're gonna be dying. We're gonna be gone anyway. So come on and eat. Come get some water. And it didn't require you being in the church. It didn't require a relationship with someone that's abusing you. It didn't require you to be the emotional punching bag for anyone or anybody because they're not ready to go to the places that you feel like they have the capacity to be in. And some of us, because we've been hurt, we just downright mean. And so what I learned is that fasting is not just about the gateway. That's the ultimate goal. You want to. Everybody's not going to get it. And that's fine. But even if you don't understand fasting in God's honor, cut something out that you are using to recreate a condition from a happy place because you're miserable. Sorry. Consider that you really just might be lonely. Consider that you're still mad that you didn't tell this person about themselves. Consider all of the adverse feelings that are pushing you to a specific place to recreate a time that you felt safe, that you felt appreciated, that you felt loved, that you felt worthy. Consider that that thing is not responsible for the positive feelings. It just happened to be a part of that experience. That is the art of conditioning. And it took fasting and having a point of reference and a psychology book to help me understand that. So, if I could leave you with anything, consider the things that you do, hoping to not feel the adverse feelings that you are currently walking around with. And don't think of food creates this, money creates this. Think about what it's covering up. Think about the emotions that you're feeling currently and the why. And then when you finish figuring out the why you feel that, think about how you got to that thought process. Because there's so many instances that we have feelings, we have thoughts, we have likes that come from a school trip when you realize you finally got some money to go on a trip and have school lunch. So this wasn't perfect, but I hope that it does something. I may do another part. And another thing I want to leave folks with, don't let nobody trick you out your spot. I'll save that for the next one, but for real, don't let nobody trick you out your spot. Not a not a fan, not a foe. Because either one of them can be just the satiation of some adverse feeling and experience that you're having in the present or in the past that you're just refusing to deal with. So, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And like I said, I hope it was good and it helps. And if somebody else needs to hear it, just to know that they're not crazy and they're not the only one, send it to them. Talk to you later. Bye.